How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to another episode of Tear Talk. Interesting case coming out of Arizona. Let me show you a quick little video. I'm just so confused by this case. Let me share this real quick.
And thank you for joining us. I'm Monica Garcia. The Pima County Attorney's Office is now confirming that the Marana father, who pleaded guilty to the murder of his 2-year-old daughter after leaving her inside of a hot car, took his own life. It happened this morning just before he was supposed to be taken into custody. Christopher Scholtes took a plea deal for second-degree murder and child abuse 2 weeks ago. Per conditions of that deal, he was given these 2 weeks to remain out of custody before going to jail for the death of his 2-year-old daughter, Parker Scholtes, in July of last year. If you remember, she was left inside of a hot car outside Scholtes' former Marana home. News 4 Tucson's chief investigative reporter, Corus Nylander, you've been covering this case from the very beginning, and you were the first reporter to confirm Scholtes' death. You join us live outside Pima County Superior Court. Corus.
Yeah, Monica, no other way to describe it. Just an absolutely heartbreaking case. It has been from the very beginning. Just within the last hour, Pima County Attorney Laura Conover released a video statement, our first official confirmation that Scholtes took his own life. I was able to confirm he had died before any official releases this morning by going to the Maricopa County Medical Examiner's website, looked at the database there where he was listed as deceased. He had moved with his family to Phoenix a few months back in the middle of this murder case. Scholtes was supposed to make his way down here to Pima County Superior Court this morning at 9 o'clock for a hearing where he was to be taken into custody per his plea agreement that he made 2 weeks ago. He didn't show up. As soon as the judge entered the courtroom, I could see something was wrong. Scholtes' attorney and the prosecutors seemed very concerned. Someone whispered into the judge's ear and her demeanor quickly changed. She ordered a brief recess. After I'd estimate about 5 minutes, she returned. They made no mention of Scholtes' absence. The judge vacated today's hearing, but did reaffirm the November 21st sentencing date. I followed Deputy County Attorney Kim Hunley into the hallway. She seemed very emotional. I asked her what had happened. She told me at that time it was unexpected this morning and that her office will send more information later. Of course, now we have received that information confirming that he took his own life. But I spoke with the guardian of Scholtes' oldest daughter, 17-year-old daughter from a previous marriage, who, as I broke yesterday, had filed a lawsuit against Christopher Scholtes and his wife Erica with claims of things such as emotional distress, assault, battery, and fraud. I spoke with the guardian, Lindsay Eisenberg, who helped file that lawsuit. She tells me she was the first one to inform his oldest daughter of this tragic news.
I was the first one to inform his oldest daughter. And, you know, obviously I called her and I'm like, okay, you need to sit down. And she's like, she already knew the moment I told her you need to sit down. So, she has mixed emotions as well. You know, happy and sad.
And she says the daughter still plans to move forward with that lawsuit. The Phoenix Police Department is investigating Scholtes' death. Again, the judge reaffirmed November 21st sentencing date. It's unclear, given his passing, how that may impact the sentencing in this case. County Attorney Laura Conover did want to express great sympathy to the siblings of Parker Scholtes and Christopher Scholtes' surviving daughters in this case. Of course, now left without their sibling and their father. Just a heartbreaking case all the way around. It has been from the very beginning. We're live tonight outside Pima County Superior Court. Corus Nylander, News 4 Tucson.
Yeah, this is a disturbing case on so many levels. Here's the daughter, Parker. She was 2. And then there's the controversial trip to Hawaii. He was able to go to Hawaii while he was on bond. So let me read the details here. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. So on July 9, 2024, in scorching summer heat in Marana, Arizona, Parker, just 2 years old, was left in her family vehicle, 2023 Acura MDX, after her father, Christopher Scholtes, returned home around 12:53 p.m. with her strapped in her car seat and asleep. Rather than carry her inside or check frequently, Scholtes left the engine running with the AC on, but he also admitted knowing the vehicle had an automatic shutoff after approximately 30 minutes, which would disable the AC as well. He entered the home and spent his time playing video games, browsing online, and drinking, while Parker remained unattended in direct sunlight as the inside of the parked vehicle heated up to life-threatening levels. By the time Parker's mother, Dr. Erica Scholtes, returned home around 4 p.m., she discovered Parker unresponsive in the back seat. The air conditioner was off, the car was hot, and the little girl had endured hours of extreme heat exposure. Emergency services were called. Parker was rushed to the hospital and pronounced dead. I actually did a series of videos on hot car deaths, maybe two, I forget, but one definitely discussing hot car deaths in general. I posted it up on my on my Facebook, on my YouTube post-it board. So if you guys want to check it out, it's a lot more common than people may think. So the suffering this little girl must have endured. So when no one can precisely reconstruct every moment of her distress, the medical and investigative findings paint a chilling picture. The outdoor temperature that day was recorded around 109 degrees Fahrenheit. 109 degrees Fahrenheit. Autopsy reports indicate Parker's body temperature reached 108.9 degrees Fahrenheit. The vehicle was parked in direct sunlight, the car seat located on a west-facing window side, intensifying the heat inside, and Scholtes admitted he knew the AC would shut off after the engine auto turned off, yet he remained inside the house for up to 3 hours. Some people say 3.5 hours, while Parker sat inside the car. In such conditions, the human body begins to fail. The car's interior likely exceeded 120 degrees Fahrenheit, perhaps much higher in the back seat where Parker was strapped. Heat stroke would set in rapidly, dehydration of the organs, brain damage, failure of vital systems, all while Parker, strapped in a car seat, likely unconscious or convulsing, suffered alone. Investigators also uncovered that Parker's older sisters reported prior episodes in which their father left them unattended in vehicles when they were younger. They said he got distracted by playing his games and putting his food away. That's what one told authorities. And text messages between Scholtes and his wife show repeated warnings ignored. This is one text message here where she goes, "I told you to stop leaving him in the car. How many times have I told you?" And that's from his wife, Dr. Erica Scholtes. And he wrote back, "Babe, our family, how could I do this? I killed our baby. This can't be real." And that's Christopher Scholtes. That's what he wrote back. This wasn't a mere accident of forgetting, prosecutors argue. It was a result of willful neglect, knowing the risk and ignoring it. Interesting, willful neglect, because you know the car can get hot and yet you still left her there. Maybe the intent wasn't to kill her, but you knew the car could get hot and this could happen. So, but check out these warning signs, guys. You know, we look at these cases. I just did a video on Jacqueline Torres Garcia, Mimi, failures there. Manuel Harrow's case, failures there. It's like repetitive in all these cases, and the failures come when you note that something could have been preventable. So at one point you tend to get a little bit frustrated because it's another sign that things could have been prevented. But in some of these cases, it's just also other things that connect to it. You know, for Jacqueline Mimi Torres Garcia, we're looking at taking her out of homeschooling, but also some red flags about her mom Carla to begin with, Nanita, the sister Jacqueline, and then you got the Emmanuel Harrow case with the history of Jake and what he did to Promise Faith, and all these things that just they give you all these signs, and yet they get ignored. I mean, you even got the Jesse Mack Butler case. It was in Oklahoma, and they sentenced the guy as a youth offender. So between June of 2014, December of 2020, the Arizona Department of Child Safety investigated Scholtes 9 separate times for alleged physical abuse, emotional abuse, and neglect of children in his home. Each investigation was unsubstantiated and closed without intervention. Now, by the way, unsubstantiated is not unfounded. It just means it can't be proven. That's got to be worried about that. Unsubstantiated does not mean it's again, that the person didn't do it. It's just at this point we don't have enough evidence. So that means keep your eyes on it more, you know, but unsubstantiated is it's like, well, I can't prove it either way. So I got to be careful. You know, it's not like the case is outright unfounded or it's just unsubstantiated, just not enough evidence either way. So you figure it would err on caution. Reports allege that he slapped and bruised one daughter, screamed at the children, called them mistakes, and interfered with their therapy. None resulted in removal of the children. The pattern raises serious questions about how the system assesses and responds to repeated risk indicators. And by the way, I noticed it did say therapy, so the details in the narrative that I got, which comes directly from the Arizona Department of Child Safety investigation summaries, and it's also referenced in news media, is that one of Christopher Scholtes' older daughters have been in or recommended for therapy prior to Parker's death. DCS case notes spanning 2014 and 2020, as we mentioned, reportedly included allegations that Scholtes was verbally abusive and emotionally degrading towards his older children, sometimes, as we mentioned, calling them names or telling them they were mistakes. In one case, it was alleged that Scholtes refused to allow one of the children to attend therapy or mocked the therapy process, discouraging participation. While the DCS investigations were ultimately deemed unsubstantiated, that therapy-related allegation was cited as part of the pattern of family dysfunction and neglect, not direct evidence of physical abuse, but of emotional instability and resistance to intervention. So at least one child was in therapy or had been recommended for it, and Scholtes' interference or hostility towards that process was part of what prompted earlier DCS involvement. And so it's right there in front of people. Okay, let me, let's see, where was I? So the fact that Scholtes' own children told authorities this was a recurring practice, leaving children unsupervised in vehicles, underscores how the tragedy was preceded by avoidable failures. So Scholtes was arrested for second-degree murder and child abuse, yet never spent a single day behind bars. He was released without bond pending trial, and astonishingly, and we're going to get to this, granted permission to travel to Hawaii with his family while awaiting prosecution. That to me is insane. In 2025, prosecutors elevated the charges to first-degree murder. Scholtes first rejected a plea offer, but on October 22nd, 2025, facing overwhelming evidence, he accepted a deal. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and intentional child abuse with an agreed sentence of 20 to 30 years flat time, no parole, no early release. He was ordered to surrender on November 5th, 2025, ahead of formal sentencing set for November 21st, and he never made it. So, for me, the most bewildering decision in this entire case occurred months before the plea deal, when the court granted Scholtes permission to take a family vacation in Maui, Hawaii, despite being charged with murdering his 2-year-old daughter. The request came through his defense attorney, who argued that Scholtes wanted to spend quality time with his wife and surviving daughter, and that the trip had been planned prior to his arrest. The defense also emphasized that he had been compliant with court conditions, was considered a low flight risk, and that his travel would be supervised by his wife, who was also a medical professional. That could have turned out worse. The Pima County Attorney's Office. Love your thoughts on that, by the way. Even for the lawyer to say the trip will be supervised by his wife. I mean, you go to Hawaii, he could have taken her out and ran. I mean, he's got I mean, I know he took himself. He wound up killing himself, as you saw in the. But I mean, he could have just went to Hawaii and took out his whole family. He could be at a risk because of what he has to go through. That could have been a reason, you know, I think at that point he could be more dangerous. He's looking at possibly 20, 30 years to life. You know, he could wind up just ending it all, and it could be a homicide / suicide. He could wind up killing his whole family. I can't believe they would say he'd be supervised by his wife. The Pima County Attorney's Office objected, strongly opposing the motion. Prosecutors argued that allowing a man accused of killing his child to travel out of state, and particularly to a resort destination with his remaining children, was deeply inappropriate and could re-traumatize his family. They warned the court that Scholtes' history of neglect and his ongoing access to children made him a continuing risk. Despite those objections, the court sided with the defense. The judge approved the travel request under strict conditions. Scholtes was required to notify pretrial services before departure and immediately upon return. He was prohibited from having unsupervised contact with any children, including his own, and he was remained under alcohol restriction and check in electronically while away. That's enough, right? And notify pretrial before he leaves, and then when he returns, for that whole middle, doesn't matter. Incredibly, court documents confirm that the family did take the trip. Photographs later posted to a private account showed them in Maui. For many observers and even veteran law enforcement officials, this decision became a flashpoint for outrage, raising questions about how pretrial release can be granted so freely in cases involving child deaths. The optics were impossible to ignore. A father accused of letting his daughter die, in the heat of an Arizona car, now vacationing Hawaii before trial. For Parker's extended family, including her grandmother, Cynthia King, it was nothing short of surreal. And then you got the final act of avoidance. So November 5th is today, right now. And earlier today is when they were notified that he took his own life. So that's today. So early this morning, police found Christopher Scholtes dead in his Phoenix home. He had taken his own life just hours before he was due to surrender. The Pima County attorney confirmed it was suicide, and investigators believe carbon monoxide poisoning may have been the cause. The official ruling from the Maricopa County medical examiner is pending, but expected within 90 days. When Judge Kimberly Ortiz convened court for his surrender hearing, news of his death arrived within minutes. The session was immediately vacated. For Parker's grandmother, Cynthia King, prosecutors drove directly to her home in Marana to break the news in person. The courtroom justice that many hoped for, the sentence, the accountability, died with him. So there's no suicide note, or none that have been released, sorry. There's no suicide note that has been released. Several factors point to why Christopher Scholtes might have chosen to end his life on the very day he was to surrender. I think it's more about dealing with the consequences, or maybe there could be guilt because of the text soon after what he said, and maybe this last trip with his family was never about him taking the last trip and then turning himself in, but rather he may have already decided that he's going to kill himself soon after this trip. So maybe accepting the plea at that point really wouldn't matter. He already had his plan to kill himself. So there could be guilt here. But the problem is you also have a pattern of neglect and all this other stuff. So now finally, when this is the final outcome, will the person actually feel guilt? It's hard because he had a pattern of neglect. So you have to look at that pattern too. But he never had an outcome like this either. So what do you guys think? Do you think he felt guilt, or you think maybe shame? Or do you think that he just didn't want to deal with the consequences of going to prison? Or could it be a mixture of both? Throughout the investigation, text message, so the weight of guilt. So one reason we think could be guilt. Throughout the investigation, text message and interviews revealed that Scholtes had been haunted by guilt. He confessed to his wife that he had killed our baby and appeared unable to reconcile that truth. Friends described him as withdrawn and depressive in the months after the plea deal, facing years in prison, separated from his remaining children, and publicly condemned. The burden of guilt may have overwhelmed him. Could be. But also the fear of imprisonment, or dealing with the consequences of imprisonment. So that's number two. The plea agreement carried a flat 20 to 30-year sentence, meaning no possibility of parole or early release. Scholtes was 37 years old. A term of that length effectively meant he would not be free until his 60s. For someone who had never spent a day behind bars, the prospect of decades in prison under the label child killer, which is the lowest label you can have in prison, right below child rapist, could have felt unbearable. Then you have the public condemnation and media pressure. So the case drew widespread national attention. Outlets from Court TV to People Magazine and the New York Post covered every development. Scholtes' name became synonymous with parental negligence and cruelty. Facing both community scorn and national outrage, he may have viewed suicide as the only way to escape the humiliation of an infamy surrounding his conviction. I also put family estrangement and hopelessness. Reports indicate that his marriage had been strained even before Parker's death, with documented arguments over alcohol use, irresponsibility, and child safety. After his plea, any remaining family bonds appeared fractured, even though he did go on that trip to Hawaii. With his wife and surviving daughters preparing to move forward without him, Scholtes may have felt completely alone, unable to face what was to come. Hey, guys, what's your thoughts about his family going to Hawaii with him? The wife, the two kids? That doesn't sit right with me. What's your thoughts on that? And control and avoidance. In a final act of control, Scholtes may have chosen death as the only outcome he could dictate. Facing a justice system that was finally ready to hold him accountable, he took back that control at the cost of his own life. And I see that a lot in the prison setting. I do. People think it's a cowardly way out, and it is. They're not going to face accountability for the full sentence, but it's also a way that they get total control. So whatever his reason, his suicide ensured he would never face sentencing, leaving Parker's family and the public to grapple with the justice process that ended on his terms, not the court's. So Scholtes' suicide directly halted the criminal process that was set to conclude on November 21st, 2025. That's the day he was scheduled to be sentenced. So that day was 16 days away. When a defendant dies before sentencing, the conviction, even when based on a guilty plea, is typically rendered abated ab initio. Guys, forgive me with that. That's Latin. Meaning it's vacated or nullified because the case never reached final judgment. So in legal terms, the proceedings end as though the conviction never occurred. For Parker's family, this means there will be no official sentencing record, no prison term entered, and no restitution order. Only the plea agreement and the investigation's findings remain on file. The justice system's final act, assigning punishment, was erased before it could be carried out. Prosecutors cannot legally proceed, and the case will be closed in criminal court. The only remaining avenues of justice now exist in civil litigation and public accountability. The Pima County Attorney's Office has confirmed that the criminal file will remain part of the public record, but no sentence will ever be imposed or enforced. For Parker's grandmother, Cynthia King, it's cruel irony. The long-awaited moment of accountability that was supposed to happen on November 21st will never arrive. The chair in the courtroom will remain empty. The judge gavels silent. If he's looking at that type of charge, he shouldn't even have been bonded, because that's another thing with the jail and prison system. The jail on this point, because he wasn't sentenced yet, would keep him alive or try their best to keep him alive. If they knew he was suicidal, they would have put him on some type of watch. So it's again, as I do these true crime things, you see so much of a repeated pattern that you figure, you would learn from each one. But I'm sure people say, well, that only happens here or not here. But it seems to happen in all different areas. So the ripple effect, the tragedy extended beyond Parker's immediate family. In October 2025, just before Scholtes accepted his plea deal, his oldest daughter from a previous relationship, who was turning 18 that November, filed a civil lawsuit against both Scholtes and his wife, alleging they caused her emotional distress. The details of that lawsuit have not been publicly disclosed, but it suggested other children had suffered trauma at Scholtes' hand. 1 year after Parker's death, her grandmother, Cynthia King, organized a memorial that brought together about 25 people. Now, this is a quote. "From the moment she was born, I used to come into their house and call her, 'Hi, Smiley,' and she just was joyful." This is from the grandmother. That's what she remembered. She said, "We would watch Barbie movies over and over and over again, and we just were good together." King has channeled her grief into action, distributing pins in remembrance of Parker, handing out awareness flyers about the dangers of leaving children in cars, and giving purple lights to neighbors to place outside their homes as visible reminders. And she said, "I have turned my grief into action. I think he needed to be incarcerated. I just had prayer and hope in the justice system." And then that hope for justice through incarceration would go unfulfilled. So this is a picture of Christopher Scholtes and his family. Let me see if I could, looks like it's his wife, his kids. Let me show you this. Try to bring it up here. So that's, I think you guys can see that. That's some of his wife, his kids, and she's holding Parker, the wife. And then I'm trying to see if there's a picture of Cynthia King, the grandmother. I would think is Cynthia King the mother of his wife? That's what I would have to guess. It's the mother of his wife. Let me just see, just to confirm. Cynthia King is the mother of Dr. Erica Scholtes, which makes her Parker Scholtes' maternal grandmother. She's been the most vocal member of the family since Parker's death, giving multiple interviews to Arizona outlets such as KOLD 13 and KVOA. In those interviews, Cynthia King described herself as Erica's mother and Parker's grandmother, said she had warned her daughter that she was worried about Christopher's drinking and irresponsibility, organized candlelight vigils, purple light awareness campaigns, and distributed pins in Parker's honor, and expressed frustration that Christopher was never jailed and that he was even allowed to travel to Hawaii before trial. So let's see if we can find one of those videos. So I can't find a video, but that's him again holding, I believe that's maybe Parker there. And then this is a picture of the wife. Better picture. She's a doctor. There she is. There's a lot of videos on this case. I'm late to the scene on this one. I still want to try to give you as much as I can on the case. So Cynthia King is the mother's mother. Let's see. So what remains? Parker Scholtes will never grow beyond age 2. The father will never face the prison sentence he agreed to serve, and the traditional machinery of criminal justice, sentencing, incarceration, eventual release has ground to a halt. But some things persist. The guilty plea on public record, acknowledging responsibility for second-degree murder and felony child abuse, and the detailed investigation documenting every lie, every hour Parker suffered, every prior warning that went unheeded. Civil lawsuit that can proceed against Scholtes' estate and the grandmother working to ensure no other family endures this nightmare. In 2024, nationwide, 39 children died from heat stroke in vehicles. By July of 2025, there had already been 14 such deaths that year. I think I covered this in the video I did, so check my post if you want to see a little follow-up on this. Parker Scholtes' death was entirely preventable. Her father knew the car would shut off. He'd been warned repeatedly by his wife. His other children had told authorities this was a pattern. 9 DCS investigations had raised concerns about his treatment of children, though none were substantiated. System failed Parker at every turn, and then at the moment it was finally about to hold someone accountable, even that was taken away. Justice in its traditional form will never be served, but Parker's story endures as a stark warning and a call to action, to take every report seriously, to believe children when they speak, and to never assume just a few minutes in a hot car is safe, and to remember that some mistakes can never be undone. Guys, that word unsubstantiated, we got to be careful of that. Unsubstantiated does not mean it's person's innocent. It just means there's not enough evidence either way. Guys, if you like the content, please don't forget to get me, you can put in a donation for a free cup of coffee or donate a cup of coffee, whatever that is. It goes, I have the link to that in the description or on my title header. And check out the video I just did on the Jacqueline Torres case. I think you'd find that interesting. I spoke to Siobhan Scott. She's a psychotherapist, and we broke down the family dynamic. It's pretty interesting. But guys, I'm seeing a repeated pattern. Again, when you see a repeated pattern, you can't help but think these things are preventable. As always, guys, stay safe.